There I was. I was late for my court hearing, where I was to be tried for hitting a family of four with my car. And I was starting to panic. You see, I had absolutely no clue where I put my keys. I looked in all the usual places, my pockets, my bed, the shower. But it was to no avail. So what did I do? What was the solution? Well, obviously, I trained my memory for 2 weeks just to see what my mind could do. Alright, so in order to train my memory, I needed a few goals. To be completely honest, when I started this whole thing, I had absolutely no clue what I was going to do, but I had a few things that I wanted to accomplish. Those things were 1, a party trick, 2, something low-key impressive, and 3, some real applicable skill that I could use in my real life. And honestly, I had no clue where to go with all this, and none of the specifics, but I figured it out as I went, and I'll get into that later. So to start off this whole thing, I actually just straight up Googled how to get a good memory, and that brought me to this one site called The Art of Memory, which had a bunch of cool articles and blogs about, training your memory and also about memory competitions, and those turned out to be a really good standard for what I actually wanted to try to do. So in memory competitions, participants usually just have to memorize a whole bunch of stuff in a specified amount of time. That's usually things like images, words, numbers, names, faces, sometimes cards, which I found the most interesting. In these kinds of competitions, participants are given a shuffle deck of cards, which then they have to memorize and recite in order, and usually they make their own little deck about it. And honestly, I think it's all super cool. Like, this one guy was able to do it in under 10 seconds, which is, absolutely insane. Now he can just, impress his friends by saying, yo, give me a shuffle deck of cards, and then he'll just flip through them and recite them all like that. It sounded super cool, so I had my party trick now. I was gonna memorize a shuffled deck of cards. So, my goal was to memorize an entire shuffle deck of cards. And just to make it a little bit harder, I added this extra goal of doing the whole thing in under 2 minutes. So, how do I even go about this? How does one memorize a shuffle deck of cards? Well, let me introduce you to my friend, named the Memory Palace. So the Memory Palace is based off the fact that us humans aren't really good at memorizing individual things, but we are really good at remembering scenes. For example, if you're still in school or only recently graduated, try to remember the most recent test you had. I bet you can't remember questions or answers of this specific test, but you could remember just kind of vague things about, the room that you were in. For example, the desk you were sitting at, what kind of desk it is, the people around you, specific things about the classroom, like maybe what color the walls were. It doesn't have to be an exact photo-perfect memory image. It just needs to be a vague, kind of alright, this is what we're looking at, and that's really all we're going for here. So basically, what the Memory Palace is a way to store information in your brain by using the image of a really familiar place, for example, your house, or more specifically, one of your rooms. And you go into that room and look what's happening and search for points of interest where what you're trying to memorize or things typically associated with it are there. For example, if I wanted to imagine the words or remember the words turtle, tall, pan, and challenge, I would first pick my palace, which in this case I'm going to say, my room. And then points of interest. This time it might be my bed, my window, my dresser, a door. And then I would place these images in order into my bedroom. So I'd say on the bed is the turtle. Then standing at the window, I need the word tall, so I'd use Victor Wembanyama. And then on the dresser, pan, so Gordon Ramsay. He's cooking up an omelet in a pan, something like that. And then finally door for challenge, maybe a Pokemon trainer. Because they're like, I challenge you, and all that. When I want to recall this information, I simply just close my eyes and have a set path in which I walk through my memory palace and see the order. For this example, I'd first look at my bed, then my window, and then my dresser, my pan. And this can be really consistent because you don't have to remember the order. It's just, what you do. And so if I were to do this, I'd close my eyes and walk into my room and is that a turtle on my bed? And then Victor Wembanyama at the window. Wait, Gordon Ramsay? What's he doing? Cooking up an omelet in a pan? And then when I'd finally want to leave, I'd go out the door and guess I'm stuck in a Pokemon battle. So this method, it's super easy to remember words and images. For that reason, I learned it quite immediately on day one and was able to start doing things like this JetFun quiz with ease. I also found this one website, Memory League, where there's a lot of cool practice tests and ways to practice, doing that words and images memorization. And I was able to reach the maximum levels on that site relatively quickly. I'm talking day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, all that. And as of now, I'm able to memorize about 30 images in 30 seconds and kind of the same pool with words, give or take a few seconds. Okay, great. So now we know how to memorize a bunch of images and words, but cards aren't a bunch of images and words, right? They're a pair of a number and a suit. So how do we go from memorizing these words and images to numbers? Well, let me introduce you to the major method. Simply put, the major method is a way to turn numbers into words. We do this by turning individual numbers into sounds. For example, 1 becomes the t sound because if you flip it upside down, it looks like a T. 2 is now the n sound because if you flip it on its side, it becomes, well, kind of looks like an N. 3 is a because if you also flip it on its side, it kind of looks like an M, and so on and so forth. They don't all have this kind of like flippy thing, and the specifics don't really matter as long as each number is its own individual sound. Then, when you want to remember numbers, you'll remember them in pairs, and each pair will create a word. For example, if I want to remember the number 43, it could be ram, the word, because 4 is a R sound, and 3 is a an M sound, right? Another thing of note is nothing is a vowel sound, and the only thing that matters in the word is the first 2 consonant sounds. So it can be as long as you want, it can have any kind of vowel you want, so 4-3 could also be rum, it could be ramp, it could be roommate, really anything as long as the first 2 consonant sounds are r and So ramp, then all you gotta do is put into your point of interest into your memory palace, and boom, you've now been able to memorize a number, and just repeat, and you'll memorize a ton of them. Now, a deck of cards isn't a bunch of pairs from numbers, but rather a singular number paired to the suit, right? So we had to tweak the major method just a tiny little bit. So the first number would just stay the same. Whatever syllable it was, it's still going to be. But then the suit, I just assigned a syllable to each suit. So for example, diamonds were no duh, clubs were k, spades were s, and hearts were t, mainly because h is just like literally impossible to make any word with, especially as the ending syllable, so I just didn't worry about that. Then I had one more problem to tackle, which was tens, jacks, queens, and kings, mainly because they didn't follow the same 0 through 9 digit system that the major method requires. So for tens, I just used the sound 10 as the syllable for that word. So for example, 10 of hearts became tent, 10 of spades was tens, the valiant player, and jacks, queens, and kings mainly just became people that I associated with that specific suit. For an example being, diamonds, I imagine were a symbol of wealth. It was, because diamonds are really expensive. So Jack of Diamonds became Jeffrey Bezos, and King of Diamonds became Elon Musk. Other things were like King of Clubs became Tiger Woods, and the Queen of Hearts simply stayed the Queen of Hearts. Stuff like that, Now that we have our new and improved major method in place, all you gotta do is look at a card, imagine it in your head, put it into your memory palace, and boom, you're good to go. I practiced this like 15 to 20 minutes every day, which was about 2 or 3 attempts, and by day 4 I was able to do the whole thing in its entirety. Around that time, I was about the 5-minute mark, but after that, I started doing more attempts every single day, which started taking less and less time, and by day 10, I accomplished the whole feat in 1 minute and 59 seconds. That's under 2 minutes. So while learning how to memorize a deck of cards, I realized that once you know the major method, it's honestly really easy to just memorize series of numbers. So, real quick, let me go back to the images that I had you memorize at the start. So, if I walk into my room, my memory palace, right, I remember Turtle, Victor Wembanyama, I think that's Gordon Ramsay, and then at the door is a Pokemon trainer. Great, and so what were the words? Well, they were turtle, they were tall, he's cooking in a pan, and he's challenging me. Great, so turtle, tall, pan, challenge. If we were to use the major method and convert these words into number, it'd be tur, that's tur, which is 1-4, tall, which is 1-5, a pan, 9-2, and challenge, which is 6-5. 1-4, 1-5, 9-2, 6-5. Well, congrats. You just memorized the first 8 digits of pi. On day 6, I started messing around with the idea of memorizing pi. At this point, I kind of already had the major method at least a little down, so I decided, why not? On that day, I was like, I'll just take a few minutes to memorize some digits of pi, and ended up memorizing 76. And oh boy, was I in for a ride. So the cool thing about the memory palace is once you've gone over anything, just even thought about it once, it's kind of up there forever. So you never have to go back and relearn or review any of it. And for that reason, you're able to just look at every single card in a deck of cards once, and now you can recite it in an order. So with this thinking in mind, I figured I could just do the same thing with digits of pi. I would just run through every single digit once, and it'd be up there forever. And honestly, the strategy worked literally exactly how I thought it would. On day 10, I just sat there and looked at 150 digits of pi. I just went through each one, put it in the memory palace, and boom, that was 150 digits of pi. That's up in my brain now. And on day 11, I took a little further. I was pretty bored in English class, so I went ahead and memorized 500. And then day 12, bored in statistics class, so why not? 1,000 digits of pi. Like, dead ass. I can literally just, right now, if you ask me to, say 1,000 digits of pi. Like, I did not think I would be able to do that. Like, it came out of nowhere. I would do it for the video, and I kind of wanted to, but it literally takes me 12 minutes to do the entire thing. So, yeah, that's not happening. So that's the low-key impressive thing over my 2 weeks done. There are some funny anecdotes I have about it. First one being about my memory palaces. So while I was memorizing the cards, I used my house, which held up an entire shuffled deck of cards, which is equal to 52 images, or 52 pairs of numbers, which equates to 104 digits of pi. I memorized 1,000, so I needed to get a little bit more space. So I lengthened my memory palace to include some other palaces, such as my school, my friend's house, the shopping center we usually go to, and the rock climbing gym that I attend with my friends. But after that, I kind of started running out of really familiar places that I could just pop up like that. So it was around 600 digits, and I needed just a little bit more, places that I just knew. And then I remembered there's a place, or a few places, that I used to visit like every single day. And so I started using Valorant maps. It's honestly a little bit embarrassing to admit, but they were actually really good. Like, I can, just remember them because I played on them so often. And so for the final 400 digits or so, I walked along Split, Breeze, and Ascent, and, there I can find all the digits of pi I need. Another thing is, when I started memorizing cards, I found out that memorizing people stuck better in my head than memorizing just kind of random things for whatever reason. And for this reason, the word pan became Gordon Ramsay cooking in a pan. The word cap became Alexander Ovechkin, tall, Victor Wembanyama, stuff like that. And when I started memorizing pi, I remembered the strategy that I used, and I kind of went right to people when imagining, anything really. And so, in my palaces, if I were to go through pi, I would start imagining things like Batman, my friends, Kanye West, furries, all of them running around, and, my house, school, whatever. But the reason that I mention this is for one image in particular, that being the image that I had for the number pair 1 and 9, that being the syllables t and p. Which at first I had tape, which became taper. So I was thinking of an image, imagining an image, taper. Imagining a taper, imagining.
Imagine if Ninja got a low table fade.
For the number 19, I imagined Ninja with a low taper fade. When I first did it, I thought it was just kind of a funny little joke, but I didn't foresee the horrors that would, very soon to come. You see, 1 and 9, or just any two pairs of numbers, there's so many different combinations. You can't really there's 1,000 digits of pi, you can't bring those together super often, right? So I just thought, he'll just come up 1 or 2 times. It'll just be a funny little gag I have. How much could 1 and 9 really be together? 17 times. 17 times were the numbers 1 and 9 paired together in the first 1,000 digits of pi. No other number even comes close to this. Like, I genuinely don't know how this happened. Like, there's so many combinations, and 1 and 9, and that creature just appear in my head 17 times. Now everywhere I go, every time I have to recite pi, I see his face in my sister's room, on the steps to my friend's house, in the rock climbing gym, planning the spike on Ascent. It's horrors. Now every time I close my eyes, and every time I want to even try to go to sleep, I see his face. Don't make my mistake. Anyway, memorizing pi is cool and all, but it's honestly not too practical in real life. No one's ever going to hold a gun to my head and say, hey, you, recite 1,000 digits of pi. But if they did, I'd be ready. I was thinking of how I could put my newfound memory skill to help me out a little in life. If no one's gonna put a gun to my head and tell me to recite pi, whatever they can put a gun to my head and tell me to recite. And then I sat there and I realized that my Spanish teacher does that literally every day. In fact, I have one that's due this Tuesday. A presentation, that is. So, if someone needs to memorize something, it's usually not just a random string of digits, right? It's usually something with words, like lines in a play or a speech, or in my case, a presentation. So I sat there and thought, what could I do to definitively say that I'm good at memorizing words? Well, then it hit me. I would memorize a book. So at this point, it was around day 11, so I didn't have too much time to memorize a book. I was only practicing about 30 minutes each day, so that means I had about 2 hours total left. So I had to pick a book that was challenging, yet doable. So naturally, I picked The Cat in the Hat. I honestly at first did this as a joke, thinking it was gonna be really, really easy because little 2-year-olds would read The Cat in the Hat. And turns out it was probably the single hardest thing I did in the entirety of my 2 weeks. To put this in a little bit of perspective, The Cat in the Hat is 1,626 words. And if each word is on average 4 characters, then that would create 6,504 characters that I'd have to memorize. And to put that into perspective, I memorized 1,000 digits of pi. The amount of characters in The Cat in the Hat is 6 times that. Thankfully for me, in the last 3 days of this challenge, the sun was not sunny, and it was too wet to play ball. but instead of sitting in the house and doing nothing at all, I memorized the entirety of The Cat in the Hat. I used the strategy from this memory champion who is on Steve Harvey, so thanks to her. Basically, I just read through it a few times, then the important part here is I wrote the first letter of every single word on a piece of paper. Honestly, this writing part took absolutely forever, like at least an hour, maybe even 2. But once it was done, I then just ran through the whole thing, looking at it and trying to recite it with just those first letters. And then once I got that, I would try to do it with no reference at all, and then would reference back to the letters if I forgot something, reference back to the book. Took a few tries, but on day 13, I finally achieved it. The sun did not shine. It was too wet to play. So we sat in that house on that cold, cold, wet day. I sat there with Sally. We sat there, we two. And I said, how I wish we had something to do. I know some good games we could play, said the cat. I know some new tricks, said the Cat in the Hat. Now, have no fear, said lots of good tricks. I will show them to you. My tricks are not bad. Your mother will not mind at all if I do. We can have with Sally and I didn't know what to say. And that our mother was at one hand. Anyway, you get the idea. I can recite the Cat in the Hat. Throughout my 2 weeks, I also did some other random memory tests, like this one that was on JetBunk, and a bunch of stuff on the Memory League website. So I started practicing images, words, names, faces, all the cool stuff. And then also some sequence memory tests, all the kind of stuff like that. I was able to get to around 30 images in 30 seconds, same for about words, and I kind of forget the things for the rest of my tests, like the names and faces, but they were all pretty good too. And after all that, my 2 weeks of training my memory were over. So what were the results? Well, 1,000 digits of pi memorized, 1 minute 59 seconds shuffle deck of cards, a certain cat wearing a certain hat ringing in my head for eternity, 17 low taper fades haunting my dreams every single night, and 30 images in 30 seconds. Woo! And that's that. I'm a little over 2 weeks late now, but I figured it's about time to go to my court hearing. All that's left is just grab my keys and go. Wait, where did I put my car keys?